Patch preview for May the 2nd just dropped, and I'm starting to lose my faith in the hydrated one. Not because something egregious happened, but rather that some changes missed their mark, especially in Warrior's case, or are simply insignificant. But let's not be too hasty with the judgment. PvE changes of this patch, at least, are near flawless. Starting as usual with Ellie. Signet of Water has been buffed to scale better with healing power, that is, heal more. At best, this is just a way to slot more healing for healing greedy fights like Bone Skinner, for example. However, I still can't see why support Ellie would pick that skill over damage negation or burn application on a regular basis. Dragon's Tooth was nerfed yet again. In World v World this time. It has become a running joke at this point, and all because you can run but you can't escape, and therefore its damage will always be a problem. Unless Dragon's Tooth has fixed speed at which it chases the target so that it can be avoided with movement skill or super speed, it will continuously cause issues regardless of how far you will nerf it. And finally, Stoneheart changes from permanent effect in Earth into temporary effect, activating upon entering and leaving Earth attunement. In short, it will now function better with Elementalist's overall game plan, disencourage camping one attunement and allow for more fluid gameplay. What scares me about this change in particular, however, is that it is more or less a solid survivability buff to already competitively strong class. Catalyst gets compensation nerfs in World v World, with Fortified Earth losing barrier and getting longer cooldown. Also, his elite now functions in World v World exact same way it does in PvP, which doesn't change that PvP might have to endure another Catalyst incident. We'll see when duration of this effect gets revealed. Engineer received a little bit more burning on incendiary ammo, flamethrower's toolbelt skill, and more burning on Corona Burst and Photon Blitz, all in PvE. In addition to that, Photon Plastic Module also applies more burning in PvE, but its power coefficient was reduced by almost third in World v World. Grenade Barrage also lost fifth of its power scaling in World v World. Guardian received short but dense packet of changes, starting with cooldown buffs for Sword of Justice and True Shot in PvE, as well as Big Game Hunter damage buff in the same mode. That is followed by nerfs to Burning Application from Firebrand's Tome of Justice passive, its relation with Permeating Wrath trait, and the active skill 5 Ashes of the Just. Combined with buff to Unrelenting Criticism, it will mean that Healbrand deals less damage, but Condi DPS Firebrand doesn't. In PvP, Firebrand's Storm skills Shining River from Resolve and Unbroken Lines from Courage were buffed, gaining page cost reduction and toughness increase respectively. Mantra of Freedom was also buffed, increasing its stability duration from 1 second to 2.5. Willbender's Phoenix Protocol now reduces Resolve's duration instead of increasing it, because fuck Willbender. In Mesmer's case, for some unknown bloody magical reason, Pistol Offhand was buffed in versus modes. Phantasmal Duelist and Magic Bullet got their cooldowns shaved by 2 and 5 seconds respectively. Touch was also buffed, with 1 more condition cleanse in Prestige and 5 seconds shorter cooldown on Phantasmal Mage. Mesmer certainly doesn't need a PvP buff. An only redeeming factor here is that both of these will be offhands to compete for a slot with Chronomancer's shield. Speaking of Chrono, in PvE, only mode where Chrono isn't objectively dominating, Chrono Phantasma gets its delay before recasting reduced from 1.5 seconds to 1/4 second, and Wells of Calamity and Gravity get their damage reshuffled, dealing more damage per pulse, but having lesser burst on the final pulse. Mirage in PvE gets his alacrity from Chaos Vortex halved. Necromancer got a lot of power damage steroids for PvE. Mainhand Axe and Focus skills got buffed with Rending Claws, Unholy Burst, as well as Spinal Shivers, all receiving roughly 20% damage increase. While damage from Unholy Fist more than doubled, and damage from Soul Grasp was increased tenfold. That combined with Reaper's Bones sharp damage going from 50% to 100 in PvE, as well as Gravedigger and Nightfall getting more damage, on top of Shroud's Soul Spiral and Auto Chain becoming juiced with more damage and infusing Terror, granting now 66% damage reduction while active so you can stay in Shroud for longer, will finally make Reaper a force in instance PvE. Also, Deathly Chill does twice the much bleeding now. Hooray! Harbinger will generate twice as much Blight in Shroud, and his Voracious Arc will consume half as much Blight to empower itself. Also, Elixir of Ambition applies 3 times as much of each condition and receives 30 seconds shorter cooldown. PvP enjoyers will also be satisfied with this patch, as Veil of Doom gets cooldown reduced, so you can that much more often, and Locust Swarm heals for more, so you can stay alive longer and even more. Ranger receives buffs to Warhorn with 20% more bird damage from Hunter's Call and 2 more stacks of might from Call of the Wild in PvP and Wolf v World. Dagger offhand skills Starcast Strike and Crippling Talon received reduced cooldown and increased bleeding amount and duration respectively in both versus modes as well. Druid received increased magical gear juice generation in Wolf v World, Soul Beast heals more from being an animal across all game modes, and Untamed is more tamed in instanced PvE. Revenant got some more healing from Fiendish Tenacity and 2 less seconds of cooldown on Mace skill 3 Echoing Eruption, both changes only in PvP. Herald's Facet of Nature no longer hits 10 targets, and Renegade's Citadel Bombardment, Ice Riser's Ire and Soulcliff's Summit got increased power coefficients in PvE, first losing some burning duration and second losing some cooldown to top that all. Then we get hit with absolute nuclear bloody bombshell. Thief is supposedly balanced some bloody how. However, trait Signets of Power gets its initiative doubled. And now we reach Warrior. Berserker was buffed with 15% more crit chance on Smash Brawler and increased power coefficients on Decapitate and Arc Divider. The same Arc Divider was nerfed in World v World, next to Spellbreaker's Attacker's Insight. Meme Swan gets buffs to Gunstinger, this skill we now store ammo and have 15-second charge cooldown. On top of that, Dragon Spike Mine gets 10 seconds shaved off of its cooldown, Unshakable Mountain grants more barrier, Artillery Slash recharges faster, and Tactical Reload gets its cooldown reduced from 60 down to 40 seconds. To that, we added some PvP exclusive changes to Warhorn skills and tactics traits. Charge now grants 5 seconds less swiftness, but has 5 seconds shorter cooldown. Good change for purposes of removing movement impairments. Call of Valor now has increased scaling with healing power. Similarly, Vigorous Shouts got its healing power scaling increased and quickness from martial cadence was increased as well. The last 4 changes were somehow supposed to enable support warrior playstyle in PvP. However, I'm not completely certain how are they supposed to fix Warrior's main glaring issue of being objectively inferior in every category. Every support in whole game has built-in projectile denial, group wound access and healing in their mechanics and weapon alone, without having to dedicate all of its utility to have one of these at acceptable quantity. Furthermore, besides his elite, Warrior has no access to rally skills and to reasonable damage mitigation for his allies. His only projectile denial is Electric Fence and Golden Nope, for which there is no place in slots that are needed for healing, stun breaks and battle standard respectively. In short, Warrior has so little group utility and damage mitigation that regardless of his healing output, he won't be able to break into the meta, nor will he get even close to it. But that's a topic for a longer discussion. Crabface out.